Sharon Brown. This is this webcast series that we want to kick off called Adventures in Learning, Forging Digital Pathways Together. I'm based in Bermuda, and this idea for the webcast came out of a feeling that I wanted to be able to support the teachers and parents in my own community, but I know that the expertise that's out there that we're tapping into can have application worldwide. So we're going to kick off today with Silvia Tolisano, also known as Languages, and she is generously offered to come and speak with us about all kinds of things. Documenting learning is a passion of hers, and she just published a book on that topic. I tried myself to buy it a little while ago, and for some reason Amazon was glitching on me. So it is available on Amazon, and I'm sure she's going to share lots about it with us. Okay, so I'm going to hand things over to you, Silvia, and if you want to do a little brief bio about who you are and what you've been doing and what you are up to these days, and also share the screen so that I know you've got a good lot of stuff that you're going to share with us, a lot of great resources. Okay.
Sounds great.
I'm going to be quiet now.
Well, no, don't be, because, it's best if we have a conversation. I think most of us, that's the whole thing of, we are in times that nobody has ever been there before.
That's right.
All of us are building the airplane as we're flying it. And we are, it's scary and it's weird. And it's hard to not know where we're going and not knowing. But I think that's exactly what we need to embrace. It's exactly these skills, and it's been said before. It's not something I came up with. This whole idea of being able to, the highly prized skills is to learn, unlearn, and relearn. Right. And I think this is for the ones who were looking at baby steps. And yes, I understand, but I'm not ready for it yet. The situation that the whole world is in, there's no more time. So we have to rethink, we have to reinvent ourselves. And I think that's what all teachers are scrambling to do. Schools are scrambling to do. Yes. And you disappeared, Sharon.
Oh, yeah, I did.
I like looking at you.
Whoops. Yeah, okay.
Because remember, these are, again, I'm talking to a screen.
Okay.
I'm talking
Here I am. Now you're talking to me.
See, those are the little things. Those are the little things that, yes, you and I, obviously, we are not, in the same physical space, but we are talking, we want to learn together. We are trying to advance education in wherever it's going to go, and make it, we want to capture it, we want to share it. And in that sense, we want to amplify the impact to begin with. So little things like seeing your face instead of, although I know you're there and I can hear you, it's just nicer to have you there and have that conversation.
Okay, fantastic.
So either way, so I think that's where we are at this moment in time. So physically, I'm in Florida, in North Florida, currently. And when I'm usually, or in the life before, everything changed. I am an educational consultant. I work mostly with international schools to exactly find new ways of reimagining teaching and learning, of how do we embed skills that allow us to amplify teaching and learning, to find new forms of teaching and learning. Because if you don't do action research, we won't be able to, when we are confronted with a situation like this, how can we push forward and learning skills that all of us, and I'm just not saying our students will need when they are when they go out into the real world. Well, this is the real world.
Here we are.
Here we are, exactly. So although obviously it's a hard situation, but I'm so happy that we get this opportunity. And that's, I guess, what my message for everybody who will be watching this, not synchronously with us, at this moment in time, but asynchronously,
Right.
whenever, wherever, however.
Right.
And who knows, maybe it's even going to be watched. Hi, Maggie. And maybe it's even going to be watched in 50 years from now, as part of a history documentation of when all of this started. And how did people react to this situation? How did educators react? How did parents and students react? And how did we deal with this? So again, I'm very aware um, of this moment in time. For us, it's new, but looking back in 50 years on this moment in time, what can they learn from us? Or can they understand us, where we were and what we did, the reasons what we did for what we didn't know in 2020. So I don't know if that makes sense, but that's kind of this moment in time. I'm trying to see it as an opportunity, remote teaching and learning, finding new ways of learning. And I guess my idea is take this opportunity and don't go back to business the way it was before. I'm going to plead, I guess, take this as an opportunity to reinvent yourself, to find ways to take these new circumstances and run with it. Don't substitute or don't expect what you did before in the classroom, the way you taught, the way your students learned, the way your expectations that you had. Do not try to simply do it through a screen, but find ways to amplify it. Find ways to really now start digging into those, what I call the now literacies, the way of reading and writing and communicating ideas and expressing your thoughts and communicating effectively with others, not just in text, but in so many new ways. Knowing how information literacy works, how media literacy works, how network literacy works, finding ways to embed this digital citizenship that now more than ever, again, is from one moment to another, we are at 150% of what we thought we had the time, I guess, to ease into this. So finding ways, finding opportunities to build skills that will foster these now skills, and not just with the students, because we're talking now suddenly parents who
Yes.
can't go to work.
That's
We're
right.
talking about parents who need to suddenly use video conferencing in order to continue working with their colleagues, to continue working at their companies. And so now we really are confronted with what are the important skills that our students will need to learn or need to know when they graduate.
Yes.
So I guess that's where I'm coming from. As I'm talking with colleagues from around the world, especially from schools in Asia who have been learning at a distance for several weeks, compared to some in the Western Hemisphere who are just starting that are just getting started. It's the shift from what is really important, what skills are going to continue to be important, and what skills are more important than ever before. I'm hearing a lot about digital citizenship. I'm hearing a lot about being able to read and write on digital platforms. And one of the main things that I'm really digging into to understand better is the idea of a new sense of community. How do we foster, again, when I said, Sharon, I want to see your face, I don't want to see, I think that's part of it. Yes, it would be the same. We still could have the same conversation but it's different. So how do we not, the sense of community we have in brick schools where we see each other every day, it's not about duplicating it. It's accepting, right. I guess, it's accepting it will be different. Not better, not worse, but it's going to be different. And how do we, as humans, how do we adapt to this? And how can we make it better? And how can we, again, the social emotional part of it, how do we get through this? That because, and I read this all the time now, a lot of teachers and students said, there wasn't enough time. I didn't have time to say goodbye. And I think that is one of the biggest, what gives me the goosebumps. How do we make that shift? Well, it wasn't really goodbye. It was goodbye to the physical, to what we knew, what we expected. It wasn't going to change. And, things that we took for granted, we can't take for granted anymore. So how do we adapt? I think the resilience comes in. How do we now adapt and not just feel the way it was before? Maggie, do you want to say hi?
Maggie is going to be coming in, I think, tomorrow to talk about digital citizenship, and she is based out of the UK, and I'm very excited that she has agreed to also give us an important session on digital citizenship. We've got, I just feel there's no end of topics that need to be tackled, and I had that same sense, Silvia, that we just didn't have enough time. We didn't have enough time to prepare. I felt I did the best I could to prepare my students before we had to break, before the school closed, the physical brick and mortar school closed. But I just feel like I didn't have the time for the teachers and for the parents. And so this comes right from my heart, this whole idea of, hey, let's draw together all my amazing friends from around the world who have so much to offer and have been thinking about these things for years. And so, so thank you again for being with us. I don't know if Maggie, if you do want to drop in and just say hi. Do I need to unmute you?
No, you're muted.
Oh, hi everyone. I'm happy to be here, and it's nice to see you, Silvia. Haven't seen you for a while, but yeah, it's great. Thank you.
Sounds good. Sharon, you were muted. You're still muted.
Yes. Okay. I'll unmute myself now. Here we go. Okay. I was just being polite. So trying to get some good practices in there because, we've chosen Zoom as our platform for when we start back up again, probably in about 10 days time with the students. So part of this is for me building in those habits, those new habits of how do we engage in this space, and so asking people to mute when they're not talking, that's one of those things where, one of those practices. So yeah, we're all learning together in this.
And I think part of it is, it's okay. It's okay. So, so Sharon, you asked me to talk a little bit about documenting learning. So I'm going to share my screen with you. Let's see if I can do that. There we go. And that popped up, your face is next to my screen too, so which is kind of nice. That although now I'm looking and you are looking at my slides, I can still see you. So that's something I really enjoy from Sharon. We can't hear you. You are.
I will unmute myself again.
Now. Yeah, you mute yourself. Exactly. So either way, so this whole idea of now we're looking at new forms. New forms. We are no longer next to each other. We do no longer see each other every day. How can we continue learning? How can our students continue learning? And because of this situation, it is it's inevitable. We have to learn, they have to learn to make their learning visible. They need to make it, they have to make it visible, otherwise it will not arrive past the screen. And not only they have to make it visible, but they also have to make it shareable. And without these components, the feedback and the whole cycle of teaching and learning just can't happen. And so this whole idea around documenting learning is about making thinking and learning visible, shareable, and obviously to make it meaningful, to not document for documenting's sake. And then, there's Kim coming. This whole idea of once this routine happens of making learning visible, meaningful, shareable, it opens up possibilities, opportunities to amplify learning that couldn't have happened before if it would have stayed within within a classroom, only between a teacher and a student, or within a school even. So this whole idea then to amplify, because it is shareable, and to amplify strategically to then amplify the learning piece. So that's the idea around the book, why I had, I got together with Janet Hale and we decided this is something we need to make visible, and we need to start sharing this idea. As we are, we just touched upon that as well. We got to figure out what is worth learning. What are the skills right now that we need to be able to communicate with each other synchronously, asynchronously, through time, through space. Meaning, it doesn't matter if you're in Bermuda or you are in the UK, I'm in the US, that we can learn together. It doesn't matter that currently there are 4 people in the video conference, but potentially over the next years, there could be hundreds and hundreds of people. So how do we learn, not just the 4 of us who are not even in the same space physically? How can we learn? How can we make our thinking visible for others? And then how can we capture this? In this case, Sharon is recording it. And how can we share it? But not just if we build it, they will come, but how do we strategically are sharing it to be able to be, to archive it, to categorize it, to tag it, to disseminate it in different spaces that others are able to find it and connect with the content. So as I'm speaking to the 3 of you, but in my mind, I already have that mindset. I'm speaking already also to people through time. And that's a completely new way of thinking. How can we adapt something like this now for our classrooms? So the authentic work that we want our students to do, who's the audience? I do know that, in a lot of writing classes, English classes, language classes, you have to write for an audience. But who is that audience? And that's what changed dramatically, I think, or what could change dramatically if we're taking the opportunity for it. So this whole idea of what are we looking to teach? What are the important skills? How do we look for learning? What will we accept as evidence of learning? Those are questions that now our teachers have to ask themselves, our parents have to ask themselves as they become even partners in this because of home learning, in one shape or form. But who is your audience? Is it really, am I just doing the work for the teacher? Or am I doing the work for a global audience or for an audience that will be looking at this in 2040? So what's the evidence? And then the question is, how will we capture it? How will we make it visible? How will we not just say, look what I did, but how will we annotate it, explain it, reflect on it, and then also how do we add our interpretation, knowing that this is our perspective? And then when we share it, somebody else might add their perspective to it. And it's so exciting if you're thinking about it. What if somebody in 20 years adds their perspective to it? Which we don't know yet what the perspective will be. But if we don't capture it now and we don't make it shareable and findable, I guess, we will never know, or they will never know. So that piece, it's very exciting, exciting to me. Please stop me if you have any questions, or if you can imagine what somebody in 2 years who's watching this, what question they might have to say, like, hold on, she didn't explain this well enough. See if you can throw it in, okay? So just, you're still muted, Sharon.
No, I know. I'm just unmuting myself here. I guess, you know, I mean, if I were a teacher looking at this for the first time, and you're kind of blowing me away in some ways of talking about that history piece, that time piece, because for me, yes, as I was preparing my students in the last few weeks, I was thinking like, okay, I need to prepare them to be able to show their evidence of learning. What are some of the tools I can use to do that? And we talked about that, but what I hadn't thought of was that timeline. And that's brilliant. That's really brilliant. So I guess I would ask on behalf of the teachers, so what kind of tools are you thinking about that would allow for that, to support that documentation over time and annotation and responses and tagging and all the things that you mentioned?
So I'm not married to any specific tool.
Okay, approach if you want to do that, go with that.
It's I guess what I'm married to is the choices of multimedia. It doesn't matter if it's in text. It doesn't matter if it's a podcast audio, if it's a vidcast video, if they are tiny little short video clips that are put together, that are curated together, and then crowdsourced together to be able to share a bigger picture of what we are trying to capture. I love visuals. As you can see, to me, simply making infographics or making visuals, images, photographs that are arranged, that are curated in a certain way. All of these are fantastic. For me, this whole idea, I guess, of documenting, capturing works so well because it is not focused in on one project or one activity or one subject. It's about learning. It's about figuring out how do we create evidence of learning, and how do we move from not only sharing, look what I did, I got an A on the spelling test, that means I learned it, but actually finding ways to authentically use what we are learning, and then making it visible that, look, these are the skills that I have in order to create this, or in order to share that. These are the skills that I'm having. For me, my focus again are these now literacies, that with documenting your work, it's embedded, that you are practicing, you are developing, and you are gaining fluency in these new skills and literacies. The idea of practicing, using your brain and practicing thinking about your own thinking, metacognition. It's embedded in here because it's part of, and I always say this, I mean, for me, I compare it with learning a language. To be able to think about what you're thinking, and in order to have vocabulary and have grammar rules and and you're able to speak without thinking what's coming next, that fluency, this is all applicable. And you don't wake up one day to another to, to speak another language. It takes practice. It takes being immersed in a language. It takes being immersed in the culture, because, as we know, we have the perfect 3 examples here of, Canadians have a different culture than the people in the United States or in the UK, right? Yeah. So just because, and then we have the Australians and the New Zealanders, and just because we speak the language or the words doesn't mean we can communicate fluently in that culture. So it is the same way. It's about learning about tools as vocabulary. It's learning about how you use certain tools for what reason. You would use a tool like Instagram in a different way as you would use a Twitter platform. It's about learning the rules, the grammar rules, I guess, in the language, and then immersing yourself in the culture of being able to actually be able to communicate. Making your thinking and learning visible, rethinking, what does that mean for evaluation? One of my favorite gurus, Alan November, who wrote the book, Who Owns the Learning? He explains it very well, that let's not take that away from the learner. Let the learner be the one who needs to show evidence of their learning, and not me digging for it or me preparing the exam and for them to answer it, to show. It's a different mindset of how do I evaluate, or let me share my learning with you, and I can make it visible that I have learned. And then I guess the reflection component. And that, to me, if nothing else at this point, if teachers and parents would help their kids become more reflective as they're at home, whatever they're doing, if they're helping to cook, if they are helping to, or if they're doing what their teachers ask them to do in a packet, don't just finish the worksheet. Work on the reflection, the thinking about their thinking, the connecting it to looking for learning. So where's the learning in this? What did you think before? What are you thinking now? Using those visible thinking routines. That's what I would say. That would be a fantastic starting point. Focusing in on reflection, focusing in on making it visible, making the learning visible, showing evidence of learning. Anybody want to stop me, ask me any question?
I know that Maggie has had that training on visible thinking from Project Zero, I think it is, right, Maggie? I'm not as familiar with it. So yeah, that's does anyone want to add something to kind of help me understand more what you mean by visible thinking? I don't know, just some examples maybe?
Maggie, you want to share?
So when I did the visible thinking training, we learned certain thinking routines that we would use with our students. So the very first one we learned was, let me have a think about it, what makes you say that was the first one. And we did that by just looking at an image and just asking, what is it? And then students would respond, and we would say, well, what makes you say that? And then they had to think a little bit about it. And then you'd ask again, well, what makes you think that? And then they'd think a little bit more. And we gradually started adding more of the visible thinking routines on, like think, puzzle, explore. I used to think, and now I think. I don't know, there's lots and lots of different thinking routines that you can use.
They're all available on their website, by the way.
They're all available on their website, and it's just a matter of, I think, becoming familiar with them, so that you are obviously thinking about your thinking, but it becomes a natural part of what you do rather than something that's kind of bolted on the top. So the best analogy I could give of that is, it's like learning to drive a car. And in the beginning, you're thinking about all the different skills separately. You think about, oh, I have to steer in a straight line. And then later on, I have to steer around a corner. Oh, I have to change gear. Oh, I have to remember to look in the mirror. And in the beginning, it's quite overwhelming because your brain is thinking all the time about what you have to think about next. Whereas after a while, when the thinking routines become familiar, it just becomes a natural part of what you're doing, in the same way that now you get into a car and you just drive and you're not thinking all the time about, what I have to do next, what I have to do next, what I have to do next. It just becomes part of the experience of driving. And I think that the visible thinking routines help thinking just to become part of what you're doing. So you're not just mindlessly going through things, but you're thinking about it. Just becomes like a habitual part of what you're doing.
Yeah. I like the explanation of learning to drive the car. Maybe more people will know about that than about the languages. So, this whole, so visible thinking routines, you'll find that in the book as well. It's a big component of making your thinking and documenting. But I liked it so much that I did the same thing. I said, I want to have a thinking routine about documenting. So that's where the looking for learning, the capturing learning, the reflecting on learning, sharing learning and amplifying from that idea of those routines of making something that, oh my gosh, I have to think about all those things. This is just way too difficult and too hard. Here's the routine. Take it easy, practice it, and you will become fluent in it without having to think, oh, what's next? It's just something that with practice, you will get better at it. And it's the same thing for your students. So for example, if you start out with, okay, let's look for learning. What does that mean? As I said, this whole thing of what will we consider as evidence of learning? Those are questions teachers need to ask themselves as they're moving to remote learning or distance learning or home learning, or all those words that are being thrown out now. It doesn't really matter, the word. How do we do that? And then from the looking for learning, how are we going to capture learning? And that's really the step, I guess, where the most tech piece comes in. Sharon, you had asked this whole idea of, so what tools should we be using? As I said, it doesn't really matter, whatever you're comfortable with. And I guess the consensus from the educators and schools that have been doing this for a while now, for a while, 6 weeks, maybe 6 to 8 weeks. Less is more, that's what I'm hearing. Don't go and start using 100 different tools. Do not overwhelm your teachers with this long list of, you could use this and you could use this, and yes, you could use this, which is true and which is great to give choices, but it could backfire and it could be too overwhelming. So this whole idea, less is more. Right now, use what you're already used to. So yes, there are some that they seem to be designed better than others, exactly for these opportunities, as I call them right now. But don't get overwhelmed, and don't overwhelm your parents who need to be home and helping at least the little ones. Find ways. Then the reflective piece. Find routines that help you do this, but focus in on those skills. I would say, if nothing else, for the rest of the school year, if our students become the best reflectors, I think we gained. That's a skill that will last them forever, and it's a skill that will help them in their academics as well as in their private lives. It will help them in their social emotional part. Being a reflective person, I think, is definitely a skill to work on. Sharing, I already mentioned that. If we don't share, it just stays within the people that are synchronously in the same moment in time together. It will only happen, it will be in this moment in time. It will be only in this space. But how do we use tools, and how do we have opportunity to share with a wider audience? And then again, also, which I mentioned, which is so interesting, the sharing through time. And what does that mean? Doing this strategically, what does that mean in terms of amplification, extending our reach, doing something we couldn't do before, and in making our learning different, making having new forms of learning? I guess that's my idea. There are different phases in the documentation process: the pre, during, and post documentation. I guess, and I'm not going to go further right now into that. It's just this whole idea of, as you are documenting learning, the most important part is the post documentation. And that's exactly the part that most of the time gets cut out. Because after you've captured 100 videos at 20 minutes each, nobody's ever going to take the time to actually go through it and edit them. So it's a important part to strategically plan. What are we going to be documenting? Why should we be documenting? Then actually doing it, and then having evidence or artifacts that allow us to take the time to make it realistic, to actually look at these artifacts and say, what does that mean for our learning? How can I unpack them and make it visible, what I learned, how I learned, and what does that mean for me? We're talking in the book a lot about different types of documenting of learning, for learning, and as learning, which a lot of teachers might have heard these terms connected with assessment. But in this case, documenting of learning is really making what we do visible. Look at what we did. It's more a display. Look, this is how we've done this. Let's say, for example, if there's a picture of a student sitting at home working on a coloring book, and that's the picture, that would be a documentation of what was done. Okay, we really don't know. We can assume, and it depends on what kind of background knowledge you had. You would see different types of learning or absence of learning. But it's there needs to be something more. There is a place for documentation of learning, but then where do we go from there? Making the thinking behind the learning visible. That would be the documenting for learning, not just for our own learning, but also for the learning of others. So finding ways to explain the learning, to interpret the learning, to adding our perspective to this artifact of what does that mean. And then the idea of documentation as learning, when the learning actually becomes visible through, most of the time, decisions that you're making around artifacts that were taken. Curating different artifacts over time, that's when the documenting itself becomes the learning. As you're unpacking them, as you are putting them in order, as you are connecting them over time. Any questions? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I know the other day when we had our chat about this chat, you talked about digital portfolios. And you had digifolios, was that what you called
Blog folios.
blog folios? Because yeah, it was a blogging platform that that allows for that. But do you want to expand a little bit on how what you're talking about, documentation, that
Right.
last one, the curation over time?
Right.
Yeah, just expand a little bit on the idea of a blog folio.
So blog folio is a term that Andrea Hernandez, she had coined in 2008, I believe. And it's really, it's a digital portfolio on a blogging platform. And again, I'm not married to any specific tool or platform, but I do like blogs because of so many opportunities to embed, to insert, to share all these different artifacts, no matter where they're coming from. So if it's a YouTube video, if it's a flip grid, if it is, I mean, all those different ones, a Glogster, it's text, it's images, it's audio, it's all there. And it literally becomes a learning hub. It's the place where a learner, and I am on purpose saying learner, because this could be a kindergarten student, and it could be a doctoral student, or it could be a 30-year veteran teacher using a blog folio for their own learning and for the learning of others. I mean, this is how my blog Languages started. I simply wanted to have a spot where I wouldn't lose all the things that I was trying out, that I would have a place where I could be reflective. And I was hoping that my reflection would spark interest in somebody else and would help them in their learning. I wanted to be part of a larger blogging community where we talked about things. When I read a book that I could share, if I recorded a podcast in Spanish for my niece when she was little, and I wanted to have I mean, lots of things. I wanted one space for it. And I think where Sharon and I, we were talking about a couple of days ago, it's been 14 years since I've been writing this learning portfolio, that blog. And what is fascinating to me now is I am able, over time, connect my work, connect my thinking, see growth. I'm like, oh my gosh, I was talking about this 16 years ago, but I didn't know then what I know now, and how it already changed. And then some of the things stayed the same. And I have all evidence of it. When I started, one of my latest blog posts is just trying to wrap my head around this remote learning. And I'm writing down all these ideas of, this is an opportunity to connect your students, to teach, teaching them skills of communicating with strangers, which are not, I mean, they're not somebody that they will never know in their face-to-face life, but they are experts in a field that they want to learn something more about. So I was able to search on my blog folio for examples, and I was able to link to it. So every idea is connected to something that I have worked for in the last 14 years. And that, to me, being able to make these connections, being able to connect my thinking over time, where was I? What have I done, and how did it get me to where I am? That, to me, is the metacognitive part. And that, to me, is the evidence of my growth. And imagine if we can translate that into the classroom. Imagine if we can take this time now, which is, we have a little freebie given. I think that there are no standardized tests this year, at least what I've heard here in the United States. I believe the IB, Maggie, you probably know more about that. The IB has also canceled. Is that true? Canceled their their exams.
Yes.
So I believe there's nobody who's going to tell the teachers this, let's say, your kids needed these skills. We need to hit the ground running, the first day of school next year, hopefully if everything is back. Our freedoms, let's say, of being able to meet and go into one physical space. Nobody is going to say that. So I believe there is this little freedom of, well, let's actually work on these skills. Let's take the time to work on reflection. Let's take the time of building a learning portfolio where students are starting to capture their learning in this moment in time. And then we will see, what about in five months? And then we can start connecting, and then we can show that evidence of growth or the lack of growth, which helps us rethink the whole process of evaluation. And then who owns the learning? Again, pulling that one in. So blogfolios, digital portfolios, are a great way of having this space where learners are learning to organize, to archive and organize their own digital work, which is a huge skill to have. And it will be even a bigger skill to have in the future, the more information that's created. And then I'm going to give a jumping off point for Maggie with digital citizenship also is, how do we believe everything? And how are we keeping it real? That we're not documenting fakes, that we're not sharing information that's not true. And we can go to when we're not sharing information about ourselves that is not true, or we only show one perspective. So those are all opportunities for ourselves, for our teachers, parents, and younger learners to actually practice these skills. It's a tremendous opportunity. Gives me fabulous goosebumps in this, although in the scary time, it isn't, it's a freebie we're given if we see it that way. And I am reading, I'm not 100%, it could have been Pernilla Peep. She said that she got from her district, and I could be wrong, that it might not have been her, but that her district leaders were saying, everything that you have planned for next week, half it.
Right.
The expectation, make it half, and then make it another half. And that's going to be good.
Okay. So, that's good to know. It's good to know that people are thinking that way, because we are, in my own school, some of the feedback is that the kids are feeling overwhelmed. And the expectation of attending class at the same attending a Zoom meeting like this, or attending some other maybe video conference platform at the same time that you would go to class every day is just not a reasonable thing to do. It's an unreasonable and in fact expectation. So yeah, half it and then half it again. I like that very much. And I think you're right. We have a gift. We've got only a few weeks left of school proper. Enough time though. For us, we're going into our third term. So I hear it's going well for some schools, and I hear it's going not so well with other schools. So we're all in this great big experiment at this time. It's kind of a huge experiment, but we have to seize it as an opportunity for us. So yeah.
And don't let it just happen to you.
Got to be intentional.
I guess what I would like for teachers, parents, and the students to not just see it as an opportunity, it's happening to me, but what can I actively do to participate in it? I think it's, I'd like for conversations to happen about in this moment in time, we're living history.
Mm.
And yes, it is a big experiment. And yes, it's we don't know. But what we do know is, let's capture it. Let's interpret it. Let's document it to be able to learn from it. And what are some of those mind shifts of, I mean, in the world of outside of schools, workers said, well, I can't work from home, or some employee wanted to work from home, or half the time work from home, and employers were saying, no, you have to come in, you have to clock in. Well, now they have an opportunity to actually give evidence. I'm just as productive as at home. I'm just as, a contributor to my company at home. Why do I actually have to come in? So, but if we don't document it, if we don't make that visible, once this is over, I'm hesitant to say over, I'm not sure it will be over ever. But once we, the need for social distancing, the need for being separate and only being able to work at a distance, are we actually going to go back? Or are we going to have captured the possibilities, the opportunities? And are we going to do a hybrid? Mm-hmm. I mean, if there is learning going on, if there are skills that our students are learning through the remote learning that they didn't learn in school before, because there was just never ever time, there was just no emphasis or focus on it. Now, if we're doing it and we can show evidence that there is learning going on, are we actually going to go back to 100% in person? That's what's interesting me. That's where my hat as a scientist wants to, as an educational scientist, I want lab work. I want documented lab reports. I want variables change. And, if your school does this, but my school does that, and that school does that, and this was our results, and this worked for us, and this didn't work for us. I think that is fascinating. So where's the responsibility as the Western Hemisphere is just starting to go into that, in number one, being aware that we are in this moment in time, that we're living history. What will you tell your grandchildren? I mean, I'm at the point where we are just a few days away from welcoming another grandbaby into the family. She's being born into this.
Wow.
What will we tell her about the time she was born? I mean, I think it's our responsibility to document it, and I was sharing with you, Sharon, that's part of my job. I'm trying to get the 7-year-old members of our family to learn how to articulate their perspective of being at home, of being contained, of not able, I mean, how does the 7-year-old, or on her next week, her 8th birthday, that she has for 6 months planned to have a party at the ice skating rink, how are we dealing with, there's not going to be a party? So what about my almost 80-year-old mother who is by herself? How is she documenting evidence of this confinement? I think it's all worth exploring. And again, if we have this freebie, why not concentrate on being active participants and contributors to this moment in history? What a history lesson, what a language arts lesson, what a digital citizenship lesson. I mean, what a global perspective lesson. It's all there.
Interesting. You shared this really cool app with me the other day, and I haven't had a chance to take a closer look at it. I know when I was speaking with Bernadine as well, she mentioned it. And I really was intrigued by how you were using it with your extended family to have fun, be playful, and to connect. So do you want to just share a little bit about that app?
Sure. So the app is called Goose Chase. Goose Chase, and it is a digital scavenger hunt. It's an app you can download on your tablets, on your phones. And as a game master, you can create missions. And each mission has different points that you choose. You can really, I mean, it's customizable of if you want to have a Spanish language mission, if you want to have a math exercise mission, whatever it is. In our case, our family, again, is spread out all over the world. We've got right now Argentina, Brazil, Canada, USA, and Germany, that we are all in quarantine in different countries. And the main concern is our social emotional part of continuing to feel connected, although the borders have closed and there are no, no way of actually traveling to each other. So that's the main goal. The other goal is also to document this moment in time in history. It is helping the almost 80-year-olds to practice their skills of video recording and drawing a picture on a piece of paper, then taking a picture and uploading it. So lots of different skills and goals are involved there. But we've had a mission of taking a selfie with a toilet paper roll on top of, in a creative way to take the selfie, which only earns you 100 points. To going through a 77 STEM activities choices to pick one and create something and then share with the rest of the family, to giving a compliment to somebody else, to writing advice for the new baby that's about to be born. Again, at this point, I think we have 40 missions, and those two 7-year-olds, the little Canadian and the little American here, are on top of it. I'm getting text messages from my granddaughter asking, "I'm done. Will you create new missions, please?" Wow. So it's been a great way to stay in contact, to see each other, how we're doing. We have cooking involved. We have exercising involved. We have playing board games involved. So it's really it's customizable. It's very easy. Any teacher could do it for their class to foster that sense of community. Although
that's great. Yeah, I'm going to definitely take a close look at it. And I'm bouncing around with ideas of what we could be doing with my global friends as well as with my students here on the island. So, yeah. Do you want to close, Silvia, with I don't know, an inspirational thought, idea, observation that has touched you before?
I guess one of the things that has touched me is something that Kim Cofino shared. Kim Cofino shared on her blog, Always Learning. She shared this. It's just a simple graphic of X, Y axis, and that graphic showed the change in importance. In the beginning, as your schools are closing, the importance is on what tools are we going to use? How am I going to do a video conference? And how are the kids going to check in? And how are we going to actually do this logistically? And so that's the importance that was very high for in the beginning. As the schools stayed closed week after week after week, that importance went down, and the importance of building a sense of community kept going up and up and up and up.
Interesting.
So that to me, I guess, was, I'm a visual person, so that little XY axis was like, wow.
I reached out to Kim actually, and she's agreed to come on a webcast, and I'm
Awesome.
still thinking of a topic. I think it's just going to be a conversation, to be really honest. I mean, she's in Thailand, just to give my Kimbo background on that, and she's an educator that has worked in Japan and in Thailand for the last well over a decade, and she's a consultant now as well. And I think she's kind of very much focused on the socio-emotional impact. I mean, they've been in it for weeks and weeks now, and she's seen a lot. I'm sure she's spoken with a lot of school leaders and a lot of school teachers, and so that's what I'm kind of leaning toward, suggesting that I'd like to focus on that too. I think it's just critically important, and it's, we're coming into it, as you said, 6 or 8 weeks behind those who in Asia have been doing this for quite some time. And we've got, Maggie and I at least have colleagues that are still in Asia. They're trying to either make their way back and are having difficulties, or they're doing things remotely from where they are. But I think it would be good to have some chats with them as well. I'd love to hear that, that idea of, okay, first we focused on keeping the learning going, and then we realized we needed to address the socio-emotional, and we could really learn a lot from that. So thank you.
Yeah.
I want to say thank you for coming on today. Sorry, I haven't been saying much. I've just been listening to everything that you're saying, and I agree with a lot of it. And we have really just been thrown into this situation, like I would say overnight. Hasn't it really been overnight, Sharon, where we've just been trying our best? And I don't know, I really feel like a lot of the tools that we have been right there under our noses, and we just didn't use them as much until this happened right now, and now we're just using it with everyone. So I really like what you said about the blog folio. I think that's a really good idea for the learners.
Yeah.
Especially it's like a timeline where they can see their progress. And during this time, they might hit a brick wall where they're feeling like they're not motivated, and they can always go look at their blogs and see how they progress. So I think that's a really good idea.
Yeah, we'll have to talk about what we can do with that.
Oh, definitely.
Kim and I have been team teaching all year, and she's amazing. She was in Doha for the last couple of years before joining us here in Bermuda, and we both chose to stay on the island during this and kind of ride it out. So and we know we need to support our teachers. We're going to be a big part of supporting our teachers very much. So yes. Oh, thank you for the conversation. Sylvia, where can we find your book again? And how else?
Amazon, A Guide to Documenting Learning. Otherwise, just on my languages blog, there's a link to it. And
you're also on Twitter. You're also
just think languages, and you'll be able to find me anywhere. And also, if you in 2 years you're listening to this recording and you still have a question, so hopefully I'm still around. And you never know, things change from day to day, languages, find me online.
Thank you. And you responded so quickly when I reached out to you, so I appreciate your willingness to be with us today. So thank you.
Now I look forward to all the ones that are to come, and see how we can actually add all the different perspectives to make sense of this all.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, be well, everybody. Maggie, we'll see you tomorrow. Kimbo, we'll see you tomorrow as well. And it's great to be here. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you, everybody. And I'm going to end the meeting, and I'll let you know where I'm posting this. Okay. So
thank you.
Have a nice evening.
Yeah.
Bye.